Alright guys, it's been a few days since I made a video, and as I'm sure you can tell, I have been suffering with laryngitis or something that's been keeping me from being able to talk. So, that being said, I'm going to link the article down below in this video. If you cannot stand the sound of my voice, I understand, but there's a lot to go through here, especially given the fact that Life is Strange Double Exposure comes out today, and there is a lot of history around this game that most people have probably never heard about. So, I wrote this article up, and I'm going to go through it piece by piece just to kind of give you an idea of what we are working with here. It says, Life is Strange Double Exposure releases today, and while many who played this game in early access have been giving it very positive reviews on Steam, there is now cause for concern that this game will be extremely divisive among longtime fans. While these titles have obviously attracted the attention and admiration of the modern audience, and of course I know that you guys know what I'm talking about, the game leans very heavily progressive, all the games do, and that's okay, because again, if that's what the audience wants and it makes money, more power to them. But the recent accusations of bigotry and inappropriate behavior among upper management at Deck 9 Games have cast this upcoming title in a less than favorable light. The first Life is Strange title was developed in 2015 by Don't Nod Entertainment and published by Square Enix. The game was released in episodic fashion with a total of 5 episodes all coming out in the same year. Deck 9 Games was then brought on to make a 3-episode prequel in 2017, and Don't Nod then returned for their final entry in the series Life is Strange 2, which launched in 2018. After the departure of Don't Nod, Deck 9 fully took the helm on this narrative-driven series, developing Life is Strange True Colors in 2021. And most of what we're going to cover happened during the development of Life is Strange True Colors. While it wasn't brought to light until an IGN article in April this year, there was allegedly an internal struggle between management at Deck 9 and many people in the narrative department. And again, I think it's important to point out that because this article was written in April, during the beginning part of Gamergate 2, this kind of got swept under the rug and a lot of people missed this, and what I found was pretty mind-blowing. Overshadowing the success of these titles are recent allegations of, quote, sexism, misogyny, and transphobia from current and former Deck 9 employees. It can also not be stressed enough that the author of this IGN hit piece was the same Rebecca Valentine who attempted to smear the team at Game Science, the Chinese developers of Black Myth Wukong, as misogynist and sexist back in her article in November of 2023. And I'm sure most of you guys remember this article that we've discussed several times about how Rebecca Valentine and Ki-Hoon Chan misinterpreted some of the expressions that the developers used to paint this studio as a bunch of misogynistic bigots. So of course it says, according to an anonymous source that spoke with Ms. Valentine, Square Enix allegedly shied away from acknowledging Alex's bisexuality in True Colors until it was widely praised by the fans, at which point they confirmed that the character was canonically bisexual. Some of the other people she interviewed blamed Square Enix for crunch, labeling Square Enix London specifically as bullies. And again, in this article, she says that basically Square Enix did not want their game to be known as, quote, the gay game. And I understand what they're saying. Again, not every one of these games focuses on her sexuality or the sexuality of the characters, but Square Enix did not want to pigeonhole themselves to a point where they could not market this game to a broader audience. So again, this quote here from the article from IGN says, others I spoke to expressed frustration at Square Enix for a different reason. It was far too hands-on with the script. Sure, Life is Strange is a Square Enix-owned IP, but sources told me Square Enix seemed oddly reluctant or outright hostile to the diverse themes and ideas that Life is Strange fans love. For instance, multiple people recalled an incident during True Colors development where Square Enix told multiple developers it didn't want Life is Strange to be thought of as again, the quote, gay game. It's worth noting that Deck 9 and Square Enix have never shied away from virtue signaling to left-wing and liberal ideologies. And again, I've shown this before, but this is again a post on Twitter from Deck 9 Games back in 2022 about trans rights or human rights. This is not a studio that was trying to hide that they had a more progressive bend. But again, you can never be woke enough, as we're going to find out. With the former posting support for such things as Pride Month and trans rights on their Twitter account. However, the IGN article would go on to describe a myriad of issues: an overly hostile programmer, an unwillingness from upper management to rein in the narrative director of True Colors, and alleged white supremacist dog whistles being snuck into their games, which again is the most far-fetched crap you will ever see. And that is covered in the article that I'm also going to link in this article. If you want to read Rebecca Valentine's slop, it's a long article, go check it out for yourself. In terms of narrative director and future CCO Zach Garris, the article by Ms. Valentine tried to paint him as a bigot, misogynist, and overall creep. Former lead narrative designer Mallory Littleton detailed some examples of his behavior. She said he would walk me to my car, I'd open the door, say goodbye, and he'd sort of linger. We'd keep talking, I'd sit down, and he'd linger again next to the open door. He never made a particularly overt move, it was always subtle enough. I felt like it was maybe just a vibe that I was getting. I felt stupid, first of all, for ending up in that situation with him in the first place, but because he never clearly made a move, maybe I was just reading too much into the whole thing. It wasn't until I explained it in great detail to others that someone clued me in. So this is, again, the narrative director on True Colors getting painted as a sexual harasser, despite the fact that he never conducted himself inappropriately with any of his employees, and simply comes across as a lonely guy who wanted to maybe talk to women, but he didn't know how to approach it. This is a guy who clearly works on video games because he's bad with women, but they want to paint him as some sort of serial sexual harasser. He was also massively disliked by many of the more progressive writers and employees who were angry that he removed a transgender character from the script, and he also called BLM a hate group, which is pretty based in my opinion. Former producer Mallory Tate claims that in terms of whether or not he felt representation mattered, Garrus responded, "I don't necessarily identify with every white male protagonist, and so other people shouldn't identify with characters just because they look the same." Again, doubly based. Garrus eventually left his own volition and spoke out about the level of hostility that he faced from his writing staff. He said, "In all of my career, I have never worked with writers who were as creatively inflexible, antagonistic towards difference, or less inclined to listen or compromise as a select few of this group." He even claimed that True Colors was on the verge of being canceled before he took over as the narrative director. He said their conduct became unprofessional, more antagonistic, and accusatory toward me of the toxicity that, from the perspective of many people in the studio, was in actuality a result of their behavior. While none of these things seem to greatly impact the overall reception of True Colors, the game again received both the GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Video Game and Games for Impact at the Game Awards. A noticeable shift has taken place inside of Deck 9 Games. While previously being a studio that was able to create empathetic, progressive titles without becoming completely consumed by woke ideology, there now seems to be an ever-increasing number of activists taking hold within the company. Current narrative director Felice Kwan has publicly supported trans rights via her Twitter account, reposting accounts pushing back against so-called anti-trans legislation, which you of course can see in this post right here from 2022. And the Double Exposure lead writer Deandra Fallon Warwick is himself a transgender individual, which is likely what led to the existence of a transgender character in Double Exposure, also voiced by a transgender actor, Rachel Crowell. And again, this is the lead writer on the game, and this is the person here, transgender actor, who they hired to voice the role. And again, I used to think that voice acting, you could play whatever character you wanted because it's just voice acting, but now apparently we're at a point where you have to hire somebody or create a character for somebody simply because they identify with the same pronouns, they both identify as trans or non-binary. This is the level of insanity that we have now stooped to. Also in the writing team for Double Exposure was James Wright, Giselle Francis, and Elizabeth Ballou. Elizabeth has previously written for various media outlets such as Vice, Kotaku, and Girls on Games, which of course is just one of the many places that she has written for. And of course, Girls on Games is one of these left-wing feminist trope websites that you can assume it is. Then of course you have Giselle Francis, who most notably worked as a writer at Red Thread Games, the studio behind the now infamous DEI disaster Dustborn, and we've talked about Giselle before on her LinkedIn listed as she/her, previously having worked at Red Thread Games. Last but not least is James Wright, who's an LA-based writer who did freelance work with Sweet Baby Inc. on their upcoming flop South of Midnight. None of these writers had worked on Life is Strange prior to Double Exposure. Now, as far as the quality of the game goes, most of the Steam reviews are listed as very positive, despite the almost 200 negative reviews that Double Exposure currently has accrued. Most of the negative early access Steam reviews have cited crashes and overall performance issues being a major issue, but have also expressed frustration with how several of the characters have been altered from their original portrayal. With the changes in leadership at Deck 9 and a focus on a more agenda-driven approach, it's no surprise to see that storytelling in Double Exposure has been negatively impacted. One Steam user who goes by Basin says, "This might be the worst case of character assassination I've ever seen. I didn't want to believe it, so I had to see it for myself, but the criticism was all valid. They nuked Chloe's character from orbit, ignored all character development that happened in the previous games for both Chloe and Max, and just made her act like a childish asshole to get rid of her for this game. And then comes the cherry on top. Seconds after we get to learn what happened between them, we're forced to flirt up a new girl, even though we get a fake choice that we quote don't like her. It's basically saying, hey, forget about that blue-haired bitch, here's some new chick we like better." The dialogue is also horribly cringe and cliche, and not the cute and well-done kind of Max cringe we've seen in the past. Just actual cringy line after line. I've counted 6 horny remarks and choices in the first 30 minutes alone. How is that Max? And then of course, last but not least, another woke activist who was brought on for the development of Double Exposure was so-called accessibility consultant Laura Kate Dale. Laura, who's another biological male that identifies as a trans woman, has been a writer for sites such as Kotaku and Polygon and created a bit of a controversy back in 2019 when he published an article accusing a song in the Super Smash Bros. DLC pack for Persona 5 of using the word retarded. Virtually all mention of this article has been scrubbed from the internet, and Kotaku has even edited the linked article to one that was written by Stephen Totillo. And I have looked for this article high and low. It no longer exists. Even sites like Bounding in the Comics have scrubbed it or have unlinked it from, again, the original source article because the article no longer exists in its entirety. Accessibility in terms of accommodating people with genuine handicaps is a genuinely noble cause to champion. Unfortunately, based on Laura Dale's own writings, as well as his obsession with representation and gender ideology, it's not a stretch to imagine that he was only brought on to consult on this game due to the increased level of activism that has currently got a death grip on Deck 9 games. And of course, discussing Laura Dale's own personal portfolio, basically every book that he has written has to do with being autistic, being trans, being gay, being queer. Basically the same shit we've seen time and time again. The Life is Strange series has always been fairly progressive. This is not being contested, and I think most people have not had any issue with that up until now. But like all things do, once the woke mind virus has taken hold, Deck 9 games will not be long for this world if someone in upper management doesn't take any action at all to remove these activists before it's too late. And I'm going to leave it right there, guys. Again, the article is linked down below. I apologize for how I sound. I've been pushing this video off, this article off, but I have to get it out because this game releases today, and I think this is a big deal. So I'm going to leave it right there. Let me know what you think about all this, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, and if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you for being here. I do have two channels, Minimal Effort Podcast, as well as my gaming channel. I do have a Twitch and Kick for my gaming channel. We do live streams over there occasionally, maybe once a week. And then if you are in the market for a new PC, make sure to check out Meta PCs. Click the link I have down below. Use code TBO at checkout for a special discount. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.